Hey everyone, and welcome to a very special Talking Insomnia episode. I'm super pleased to have Trevor with me. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you, Daniel. It's good to be here.
We have talked once before, but I didn't, I think, properly introduce you that time. So, in your own words, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Trevor Youngquist. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm also an insomnia coach. I teach a particular method of working through insomnia that's mindfulness based. So it rests heavily on this notion of mindfulness and how to change your own relationship to your own distress in order to move through insomnia. And I'm passionate about it because I suffered from insomnia for about 2 years, and this is the method that really carried me through even when more conventional CBT-I, I was having a lot of trouble with it.
Perfect. Yeah, again, super happy. Yes, yes. You
Oh,
want to add something?
quickly, my website that I run my coaching business from is called liberatedSleep.com. I also have an Instagram. If you're interested in little tidbits related to what we talk about today, which is going to be what is mindfulness and why is it relevant to insomnia?
Perfect. Exactly. I follow you on Instagram, of course. I love your post there, and this, of course, was the reason. Out of many, but I particularly want to talk to you more about this because I personally feel like I have a lot to learn here, and I have a sense that mindfulness can be really helpful, but I haven't really explored it too much. So again, I'm super happy to have you here. And actually, we can start there by just um, what there's a lot of terminology that I think is helpful to talk about, which is, okay, what is mindfulness? What is meditation? Are they the same thing? Or can you maybe start with talking a little bit about the terminology there?
Yeah. So my favorite definition of mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. Those four kind of key elements of just being aware of what's happening right now and having a frame in which you're just watching it, you're just observing it, you're not condemning it, you're not endorsing it, you're just listening to what is in your experience. Meditation, on the other hand, is the act of sitting down and practicing a concentrated form of mindfulness in order to cultivate the state of mind and awareness that is conducive to being aware. But mindfulness could be applied to any moment of your life. It's just coming into the present moment, recognizing, here I am in the present moment, what's happening right now, and can I relate to it in a way that's objective and that's not full of judgment and subjective filters? Can I just see things as they are? And
Perfect. Yeah,
oftentimes
yeah.
that can open up a lot of doors to choice. We often run an autopilot, and mindfulness is very much the opposite of autopilot. It's taking full responsibility for what is happening in the moment, and then having the choice, because you're aware of what's happening, about how you want to respond to it. How are you going to choose to behave, and how are you going to kind of emotionally relate to what is, whether it's distress or joy or confusion, whatever your experience may be. Mindfulness, being aware of what's happening, opens up doors to choose how you relate to what is.
Exactly. And I think you almost sort of answered what was going to be my follow-up question there, which is, we're going to talk a lot about this today, of course, but why should we do that? Why do you think it can be so helpful?
Yeah. You know, when I had insomnia, oftentimes I would get so caught up in just how bad I felt, kind of the horror of being stuck in this thing that felt like I was trapped and there was no way out. And mindfulness provided for me a way to stop being my suffering, stop being my distress, completely identifying with it, and to step back and become the observer of my distress. So from being it to observing it. And suddenly there's a lot more space between that distress and the way I'm identifying, which is more as the observer rather than the distress itself. And if I can be apart from that distress, watching it happen without a lot of judgment, just kind of almost with a curiosity and an openness, then I can learn a lot about what's going on and how my behavior might be playing into it. And I can use more discernment in how I'm choosing to respond to it. So, if I'm really caught up in a narrative of suffering and my body's feeling horrible, I'm feeling nauseous, I'm really, really caught in a spiraling worry about how I'm going to sleep tonight and what the next day is going to be like. And then is this going to go on for the rest of my life? Mindfulness, coming into the present moment, stepping back from that narrative, stepping away from that nausea, even just watching it be there, I can say, is this helping me to really place all of my attention on this kind of intrusive thought about what if I don't sleep tonight? What if tomorrow is awful? What if the rest of my life is awful? Is that fruitful for me? Is that helping me work in a direction that I want to go in my life? And I think for most people with insomnia, when they get familiar with a model of recovery, usually giving a lot of your attention and endorsing a lot of those worries and spending, an hour ruminating and trying to problem solve it is usually counterproductive. And so mindfulness gives an entry point to choose, how can I relate to this in a way that's in service of my recovery rather than sabotaging my recovery?
Absolutely. I think, everyone who hears this now will really get a sense for, okay, yeah, that makes total sense, can be really helpful. And I should have said this maybe from the get-go, but we're going to talk about some specific, exercises and an approach that that I think hope will be helpful to someone who's never even even read much about or knows much about it, kind of like myself. But one more thing I want to add is just I've come to think a lot of mindfulness as a way of, like you said, like being in the present moment. And that can be important because a lot of suffering, as you say, comes from either the past, right? Thinking about the past, analyzing the past, or worrying about the future. And so when you go from the past or the future into the now, a lot of that kind of dissolves. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. You might notice that, oh, I'm chewing on the future, I'm chewing on the past. But if you're just settling into your experience of just what am I sensing right now, where am I right now, it's much harder to get tangled up in those thoughts and allow them to, occupy your mind for 30 minutes without even realizing what's going on.
100%.
Because it becomes a muscle memory, to worry about your sleep. At least that's how I experienced it.
Yeah.
It's like I paved those neural pathways into my mind pretty strongly when I was suffering from insomnia a lot, and it was very scary. And mindfulness is an alternative neural pathway that is built with practice. The experience of coming into the present moment is a skill, and to learn how to relate to your experience without so much judgment and without so much identification, it's a skill that's built over time. And that's why a practice of meditation can be really useful, is because it's like going to the gym. You're working out the muscle that allows you to have that skill to slow down, come into the present moment, and choose how to respond to what is in the most helpful way.
Yeah, well put. And that answers, one thing you often hear when people talk about mindfulness is that it is a practice, and I think you really answered why it is not, it is a practice. It's something you have to practice to get good at, if you will. Well said. So what we talked about before this episode was we're going to imagine somebody that, let's say, has trouble sleeping, has insomnia, and wants to explore mindfulness as a way of moving towards recovery. But let's say this person had really no exposure to mindfulness whatsoever, and they start working with you, let's say. How would you introduce them to, what would be like the first goals, like exercises? How would you start the process?
Yeah. I find that mindfulness makes sense as something to try and something to do when the rationale for doing it is really clear. So I usually start with filling in a little bit of the details around, why is this important? And I think we've identified a little bit of that, but just to flesh it out a tad bit more, there's a lot of brain research on the effects of mindfulness and a sustained mindfulness practice. Oftentimes over the course of 8 weeks is a typical mindfulness kind of course. And it can be encouraging to people that this is maybe something really worth their time, to know that oftentimes if someone's practicing meditation for 20, 30 minutes a day for 8 weeks, there are measurable changes in their brain, including some growth in the area of the prefrontal cortex, which is your logical, rational mind. So increasing your ability to respond logically in an emotionally charged situation, and also shrinking the volume of the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for the fight-flight response and the hyperarousal that so many people feel stumped by in their insomnia. And there's some other research that probably through the mechanism of reducing that reactivity and increasing your ability to think logically and in a grounded way about what's happening, that sustained mindfulness practice is linked to deeper quality of sleep and increased sleep duration. However, we want to be careful not to do mindfulness as a means to make ourselves sleep, because, it's supposed to be this magical thing that can make me sleep. I mean, mindfulness is all about learning the skills to respond in a way that you don't blow up your own insomnia, which is by responding to it unhelpfully. So it's not about a magic cure to make yourself sleep. It's about a strategy to help yourself get out of your own way.
Again, very well said. And I said to myself before we went on here that I want to say like 8 times in the episode that it's not a way of like making yourself sleep or producing sleep. And one thing I hear so often is someone said, for example, like, I tried meditation and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I hear that, if it's somebody that I interacted with, that's like, I didn't explain that well, or whenever somebody says like, it didn't work, that tells me that it wasn't well explained. So for everyone out there, I would say, and see if you agree with me here, Trevor, if you, let's say you start applying some of what we talked about here, and it comes to your mind like, I still don't sleep, it didn't work, that then you've probably had a little bit, your approach was not the ideal one, because you were doing it as a way of trying to make yourself sleep well. So I just want to point out again, like, let's not make it a sleep effort, right?
Exactly. And I think one more way to frame that helpfully is mindfulness is probably more helpful in reducing your suffering in the day than being some magical thing that's going to make you go to sleep. Going to sleep is all about setting the conditions and not making an effort. And mindfulness can be a little bit helpful there, but a lot of mindfulness practice is about setting the conditions in your life to not care quite as much about how you sleep, because it helps reduce some of the suffering you experience during the day. To step back from engagement with a narrative of suffering, or to not amplify your own suffering through intense reactivity, that's one of the real uses of mindfulness. So think of it as a tool to make your day better, rather than a tool to magically make you sleep.
Perfect. And that is so important, of course, because when you think about it, a lot of insomnia is driven by the fear of how you will feel during the day. And then if that's not so much of a fear, of course, you will also sleep better as a side effect there. Okay, cool. So I think we kind of established the rationale at this point. And okay, so what are our next steps?
Yeah. So mindfulness often goes hand in hand with this idea of acceptance, which is just allowing things to be as they are in the present moment, and ending the unhelpful reactivity that ends up amplifying our suffering through our own subjective reaction to it, rather than just accepting that, there's some suffering here, and suffering's a part of life, but I can deal with it and I can respond helpfully. I can choose to do things that make my life more enjoyable, more meaningful, and move through this rather than getting so caught in it. And so I'd like to do with you, Daniel, and with our listeners, a little experiential to get a taste of why that might be helpful, what it might feel like, the difference between heavily resisting your experience and opening up to it in a mindful way that just allows it to be without judging it, and even that has some curiosity about it, and that has a sense of allowing to it. So to do this experiential, it's really experiencing the difference between resistance and acceptance. So first, we can step into a state of resistance. And the way I want to do that is by having you look around your room and pretend that you hate everything about your room. You really don't like it. The shelves are horrible, the books are bad, the wall color is all wrong, the windows are too small, whatever it is, just pretend that you have an issue with everything. And step into a posture that's shut down, like cross your arms, maybe clench your stomach a little bit, just like the posture you would have when you're really having a hard time and not enjoying this experience. And look around and just find issue with everything. Pretend that you are anyways. And just say no to it. I cannot stand this for another moment. This is horrible. I can't believe that this is my life. This must change now. I cannot deal with this. And just scan through your room for a moment and apply that filter to everything around you as you hold this kind of tension and this rejection in your physical posture. What do you notice, Daniel, as you go through that little exercise?
I just took note that I stopped breathing. I was holding my breath for a very long time,
Mm-hmm.
felt tense, and felt this sense of it reminded me of other times when I go into that mode of thinking when I feel sad for some reason, and I just think about everything in my life from this lens that is so different. Usually I'm a very happy, optimistic person, but sometimes I can get into that mode where I think about everything was wrong. Like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? And I could feel that that type of thinking resurface, if you will. Of course, a negative experience.
Right. Yeah. And insomnia is full of suffering that can plant the seed of something to resist. It's not fun to have insomnia. And when you shut yourself down and you're clenching over your experience and fighting it, saying, this is so horrible, I can't deal with this, I can't believe this is happening to me, like, I just want this must end now, I must feel different than this. It creates a lot of tension, and it creates kind of a lens of pain in which you're experiencing that original pain, and it's amplifying it. And so the different perspective would be to now look around your room and to open up your body posture, maybe open your palms and put your shoulders back, kind of bringing your chest forward, and just taking a breath and looking around and just saying yes to everything. Just saying, I can allow this to be exactly as it is right now. In this moment, this doesn't have to change. Maybe I don't like this in the long term, but in this moment, I can be with this. I can just be with this without fighting it. I can say yes to what is. Do you feel differently doing that one, Daniel?
Yeah. It's I know cognitively it's just an exercise, but it's still it still feels different. Yeah, it's you feel kind of lighter, and I was thinking about, yeah, I don't know my kids just came home, I heard, and just before they left, I had been a little bit upset because they are not, they have a Spanish speaking nanny with them, and they're not speaking Spanish. And I was upset at them, and now I was like, it's okay. I don't have to fight that. And yeah, feels good.
Hmm. And so I think we can then just kind of in our mind substitute the objects in the room for the suffering associated with insomnia. How much worse could you make it for yourself if you really resisted it and ran with this narrative of, I cannot stand this. This is horrible. This must change now. Not another moment of this can I stand. Versus just opening up to it, letting that constant stream of judgment fall away, and just saying, I don't like this very much. I don't have to like this, but this is what is in this moment. And I can choose to react in a way that doesn't make this worse than it needs to be. And that opens up the field of possibility for me to make a new choice. And so that's just a little taste of the difference between fighting your experience, just going to war against your insomnia, and saying, I'm not going to battle this. I'm going to make choices that lead me on a road to recovery, but I'm not going to engage in a vicious battle against my own experience, because it works against you.
100%. And now this exercise, if you will, is this typically something you do pretty early on? I guess it is something you do pretty early on to give somebody just a sense, is it?
Yeah, usually I'll have my clients do something like that in the second session to get a taste of what acceptance means, because it can feel very abstract to people, but
Yeah.
that gives them a taste that, oh yeah, it's how I'm relating to things. It's how I feel in my body towards something. It's letting go of judgment, and that can be a helpful just experience of what it means.
Very well. And I think, we'll continue our discussion in terms of like, okay, what are maybe some next steps or further things to talk about. But right now, immediate question that came to mind that I know a lot of people have is, um, the thing, when you have insomnia, of course, the thing you struggle with, you sleep so little and so poorly, you feel, a certain way during the night and during the day. And I guess my question just becomes like, any thoughts, tips on how, look, the problem, of course, is like, how can I accept something that makes me feel so bad or something like that? Uh, any thoughts on that, like the conflict of accepting something that you inherently feel is something you shouldn't accept? Let's put it
Hmm.
that way.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important to say that acceptance is different than being resigned to your experience. So it's not saying I like my insomnia. It's not saying I'm accepting that my insomnia isn't going away. I'm accepting I'm always going to be like this. It's not like that at all. It's just saying, it seems like when I think about it, my own fight against this experience, like just playing tug of war with this monster of insomnia that's always feels like it's dragging me towards the pit. And so I pull harder, and the harder I pull, the harder it pulls back. That battle doesn't work very well. Acceptance is coming very from a practical, logical perspective of what happens when I fight my experience. It seems like I fixate on my insomnia, which we know that the more we give our attention to our insomnia, oftentimes it just feeds on that. And when I resist this, I fixate and I feel worse, and I become more frightened of this experience. And so from that very practical perspective, it's an alternative to making your experience worse through your own reactivity. And it has this label of acceptance, which seems like, I'm not going to accept my insomnia. I want this to end, which is totally fair. But I think this attitude of acceptance applies to the present moment. It's not saying I accept my insomnia for the next 2 weeks. It's saying right in this moment, I'm going to choose not to exacerbate my own pain.
Yeah, exactly. Very well put. So let's say, somebody has gotten a taste, let's say, of mindfulness, acceptance, and they say, I think this is for me. Then I understand that it's good to start establish like a practice, is that typically where you go from there, or how do you work from onwards?
Yeah, from the first session, I encourage my clients to have some sort of daily meditation practice. So again, it's just an opportunity to practice mindfulness in a sustained way to build that muscle that allows you to tune in and recognize what's happening in the present moment and respond in a grounded kind of objective way more easily. And so, yeah, very helpful to start with a meditation practice and to start small. So basically, the intent of meditation is not to calm yourself down, and it's not to change your experience per se. It's to develop the psychological flexibility to respond to your experience helpfully and to allow it to be, if that's the most helpful thing, to allow your feelings to flow through you rather than to clamp down on them and battle against them, which is just often a battle we learn that is very difficult to win.
How about, sorry, I have to sneak this one in there. How about clearing your mind?
Clearing your mind, also not about that. It's about your relationship. It's about cultivating a conscious relationship to what is in your mind. And so very, very, very frequently, even for experienced meditators, often they're having random thoughts about, their cat or their partner or their taxes flow into their mind when they're supposed to be sitting down and just meditating and staying present and aware of oftentimes aware of the breath. And as these thoughts come in, that's not bad, that's not wrong, that's actually completely normal. What is important is what you do when you notice that, oh, I'm thinking right now. Are you going to condemn yourself and judge yourself and beat yourself up? That's not the point. The point is just to notice, wow, with a sense of curiosity, there's a thought. And then to redirect your attention back to the object of your awareness.
Very well put. And so let's say somebody is very new to this. What is a good meditation practice to start with, you would say?
Yeah. So ultimately, you could practice meditation with a number of different techniques. You could scan through the sensations in your body. You could pay attention to the information coming through your senses. You could just really practice listening carefully to the sounds outside, or if you're eating a meal, you could practice really tasting each bite of your meal as it unfolds moment by moment. But I think the most common starting point for someone who's beginning to practice meditation, and just a really solid choice, is to follow the breath. So a little bit about what that would look like is first setting a timer for maybe 5 or 10 minutes for this first week, as you're getting your feet wet with this experience and not wanting to overdo it, wanting to bite off a realistic piece of the pie so you're not feeling defeated and burned out before you even get started. So just 5 or 10 minutes can be a good starting point. Setting a timer, and it's important to make a commitment that even if your mind is wandering and saying, I've had enough of this, that you make a commitment to sit out the duration of your timer, because just like you're going to experience some discomfort and some resistance, guess what insomnia is full of? Discomfort and resistance. So you're building that skill to be with discomfort and to learn how to respond to it more skillfully. When you sit down then to meditate for this 5 or 10 minutes as you're getting started, you can sit on a cushion on the ground, or you can sit just in a chair like I'm sitting right now, keeping your feet on the floor and keeping your back straight. That's a really important one. Kind of allowing your shoulders to drop into a natural position and finding a relaxed erectness in your back. You're not super tense, rigid, upright, but you're just a relaxed, straightened spine. And that can just keep things awake and alert. That posture is conducive to that. And then you're beginning, well, you can either close your eyes or keep them gently open, whatever you prefer. And then in terms of your breathing, you're going to be watching your breathing, but it's important too to be breathing in the right way. And a lot of people breathe up high in their chest. It's kind of a shallow way of breathing. And when you're asleep, for example, you breathe in a different way. You breathe in such a way that your abdomen rises and falls as you breathe. The breath is going very deep into your body, and it's probably the most soothing way to breathe for your nervous system. When you're doing this kind of breathing correctly, you should feel your abdomen rise as you inhale and fall as you exhale. You can put a hand on your stomach and feel that rise and fall to make sure you're doing it right. Some people just never breathe like this, and it can be a big kind of eye-opener to realize that there's this other way of breathing that tends to be very calming, even though that's not the point, as we said. So you're sitting up straight, you're breathing into your belly. Often breathing through your nose rather than your mouth is helpful. And then you're just placing your attention on either the sensation of air coming in and out of your nose or the sensation of your abdomen rising and falling. Whichever one just stands up to you as most easy to follow, choose that one as the object to keep your focus on and to return your focus to when you notice you straight away. I like my abdomen, so I'm sitting up straight. Maybe I'm closing my eyes. I'm feeling the rise and fall of my breath. And I'm just watching it as that sensation occurs millisecond by millisecond. I'm just being curious about what is it like to be breathing in this moment? What does it feel like? Can I just rest my attention here? And when you notice thoughts arise, your mind wandering away, just gently notice, oh, I've wandered away. Thank you, mind. And return your attention back to the breath. And it can feel really boring at first because we're so used to seeking high levels of stimulation to keep us entertained. But, you know, just it comes with the great benefit of learning how to step out of autopilot and to take more of a position in the driver's seat when it comes to your own experience and how you're responding to it. Oftentimes, it can be helpful if you feel like your mind is really wandering a lot and you'd like to find more of a way to concentrate on this feeling, is to count your breaths. So you might count on the exhale 1, on the next exhale 2, and you'd go up to 10. And then you just restart at 1. And you do that for as long as you're meditating for the 5 or 10 minutes. That's one way to occupy your mind a little bit more with this task in the present moment. If you find yourself, wandering away for 5 minutes before you realize what's happening, it can be a little bit of a tighter leash to the present moment. And it's tough at first, especially if you've never done it before. It's a new muscle that you're building. It's a new network of neurons that you're wiring into your brain. And so it takes a bit of commitment. But when you associate that commitment with a reason of why you're doing it, a reason of how it's relevant to your recovery from insomnia, even if it's not a magic bullet to make yourself sleep, that it's a valuable asset on your journey of recovery. When you can imbue meaning into this act that has a little bit of discomfort or unfamiliarity involved with it, then you're going to be more willing to do it. You're going to be more willing to stick out that commitment to sit until you hear your timer go off.
Very, very well. And typically, when clients come back and see and they've done it for a week, what are some typical things they've found on a positive note and some things that are challenging for them?
I think what can be positive is just the sense that even if I struggled, I did it. I did this thing for me. I persisted through the discomfort and I made a commitment, and I'm proud of myself for sticking this out. And sometimes it feels great. That's not the point, but sometimes you do feel really calm. You do feel really, wow, the tornado of thoughts is kind of subsiding a little bit here. Sometimes that can be a really pleasant side effect of it. And so some people say, hey, I like this. I want to see how much deeper I can go with this. That's one. But I think a lot of it just comes with a sense of satisfaction that I'm doing something that I know is helpful. I've spent so much time and energy putting my effort into these unhelpful ways of trying to fix my insomnia. I'm directing that effort, the amount I care about living well and about sleeping well, I'm directing that effort into something that's actually going to be of service to me, rather than something that just, keeps feeding this vicious cycle of insomnia.
And sorry to jump in there, but as I was thinking of, I would imagine that a potential, you know, challenge or something people say is like, yeah, I did it, but I still don't sleep better, which we already talked about. That's not the point. But where was it going? I had something I really, oh yeah, this was my question, of course, which was, do you think that this practice is for everyone? Really, every single human being can benefit for it, or do you think no, it's for certain people that have certain goals?
Oh, I mean, absolutely everyone could benefit from it, because everyone could benefit from living their life in a more conscious, intentional way. Um, Everyone could benefit from realizing when they're in a trap of their own mind, and when they're really caught up in their own judgment of themselves or judgment of others, or saying, this is so horrible, life needs to change right now, I'm going to be miserable if it doesn't change in a timely manner. Everyone suffers in those kinds of ways, and everyone could benefit from slowing down and recognizing what's going on, and increasing their ability to have a grounded perspective on what's going on, and decreasing their own internal reactivity and fight flight response. It's so universal, and oftentimes it takes something like a little bit of a crisis in life in order to create the conditions in which it makes sense to motivate yourself and to make the commitment to follow through with something that can be really grounding and peaceful, but can also take some adjustment and a little bit of a stepping outside your comfort zone in order to integrate into your life. And insomnia provides one of those opportunities to learn something that not only could help you relate to your insomnia in a way that is helpful and helps you get out of your own way, but it's so often my clients report that, wow, I have a lot of stress at work, and these strategies are so great in learning how to recognize that I'm just feeding into my own anxiety, and to begin to break that cycle. Which is really rewarding for me to see that, people are sleeping better, but then they're feeling more empowered. They're feeling more liberated in other parts of their life that have had a lot of mental baggage around them.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you, by the way. And also, I think it was nice the way you put it, that if you like, if it takes a crisis to take you to explore these things, learn about mindfulness, etc. That's good. Like, it led you to something good. And I've always thought it's sometimes not unfortunate is not the word I'm looking for, but a lot of people, I think, come to mindfulness, meditation, yoga when they have some type of stress, struggle, etc., which always adds that what we already talked about. But again, it's so important to bring up again. When you come from that point, it always adds the extra challenge of not making this an effort of problem solving. So for anyone who hears this, that is not particularly bothered by insomnia. Most people listen to this, of course, are. But if you don't feel like, I don't have any particular problem like that, I think that is another great opportunity, because if you come to mindfulness, meditation, yoga, etc., from a place where life is good, then it can just enhance that, and it can help you whenever you are faced with a struggle, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's great preventative medicine.
Very.
And just it's enjoyable when you can strengthen that skill of being in the present moment. Maybe you cultivate it through meditation, but it's also possible to just find yourself in the present moment throughout your day. You know, people like it when you listen to them. When people like it when they feel like you're really present with them, that you're not off thinking of your response, what you're going to say next, how you're going to get in what you want to say. Maybe you're just completely ignoring what they're saying and thinking about, what you need to do next in your day. People really feel it when you're in the present moment with all your attention on them. Your family will feel it. Your friends will feel it. You might enjoy doing some of the things that are a little bit tedious when you're in the present moment. like taking a shower when you're really being present and feeling the warm water on your skin. It's quite blissful sometimes when you're really paying attention. So often our minds are just blabbering away about what we're going to be doing later on that day, or what's next, or the problem that you're chewing on, that you can get through the whole shower and not even have noticed the feeling of water on your body. And it's like stopping to smell the roses. uh, this whole notion of being mindful, and it's accessible at any moment throughout your day.
And what's so interesting with it is my day job is as a sleep doctor, and as everybody else, we document through computers, and there's a lot of clicking, right, which is kind of mindless clicking, right? The interesting thing what I found is that when I do my mindless clicking in autopilot, it actually is less efficient than when I do it in a mindful way. You weirdly would think that if you're an autopilot, like it gets done faster, but actually when you pay attention, it not only is a more pleasurable experience often, but you actually are more efficient, I think.
Hmm. I agree.
Right? Very, very cool. So we talked about, we went on a little side trip there, which was good, I think. But let's say, so we've established there that this is a good, we talked about a really good meditation practice where you can start, very practical. And you talk about like eventually maybe you want to deepen it. When you say deepen it, is it just spending more time or changing the practice, or how do you go forward?
Hmm. I think ultimately, if you started out with 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, that first week, you're trying to bring this into your life more consistently. As you moved on from that, I think ultimately aiming, maybe you work up to 10 or 15 minutes, and then maybe you work up to 15 or 20 minutes. I think if you're meditating for 20 minutes a day, you're really going to feel the difference. Oftentimes it works well to do it first thing in the morning, um, or potentially before you go to bed, though that can get a little tricky with people who have insomnia. But just a time in your life, a time in your day when you're not fighting yourself to do it, it can just fit nicely when you first wake up. You don't have all the reasons of all the other things you need to be doing. So let's say that it can be great when you first wake up in the morning to
And
just make
you said,
that time.
sorry, Trevor, but I think again, I want to hit this like a fourth time, bring up the
Yeah,
same
let's
point. I
do
think
it.
it's an important one. You said it can be a little tricky doing it in the evening if you had insomnia, and my mind goes because it can easily become something you try to do to sleep more. Was that
Yeah,
why you said that?
exactly. Yeah, it's not to make your perfect wind down. It would just be potentially a convenient time to do it. If you really like meditating, then fine, do it at night. That's a great time to do it. But if it becomes a little bit murky and you're kind of half consciously using it as this tool to make yourself sleep, just stop. Just do it at a different time. And I like what Daniel says about just choosing something you really enjoy unconditionally to do before you go to bed.
Very, very well. Okay, so I think we've talked.
Oh,
I think
one more thing. If you
yeah,
if you are building a longer practice of 15, 20 minutes, and you're feeling some confidence about your ability to remain in the present moment and kind of bring your attention back when you notice you've wandered away, um, one of the things you can stop doing is counting. Counting can be a little tedious, counting your breaths, and it can be a deeper experience once you get the hang of it, to just be with that experience of the rise and fall of your breath, or the in and out sensation of the breath in your nose. Just being with that sensation without any kind of label, without any kind of counting. You're just being with it as it unfolds moment by moment, and time can kind of slip away when you're in that almost a flow state you get into. So if you get comfortable enough, or if the counting feels really tedious, you can cut that out and just practice being in the unfolding of your experience of breathing millisecond by millisecond, and just hold your attention there.
very well. And I have some more questions. One was actually yourself. Did you learn through your like formal education or elsewhere? How did you learn about mindfulness?
Mhm. When I was an undergrad, I was curious about Zen Buddhism, which is kind of a very pragmatic approach to mindfulness, and just about being here and noticing what is, and inquiring deeply into your experience. And so that was my original exposure to it. And I have had a mindfulness practice. I had one from that exposure onward, but it actually wasn't until I developed insomnia that I got really serious about applying that mindfulness. And another reason why my insomnia ended up being an opportunity to kind of deepen my relationship with myself, because I was doing the Zen meditation, but in a way, it was like when it came time for me to really suffer, it still felt like, no, best answer is me trying to problem solve this and just fix it. And so I had a really hard time applying my meditation and my mindfulness to insomnia at first. But then I realized it's just a golden opportunity to really take it to a deeper level, because it's hard to do it. It's hard to have an openness when you feel really bad, but it also trains that muscle and opens up your perspective in a more powerful way when you have an opportunity to relate more gently and curiously and even compassionately to something that's really hard.
Very, yeah. I love every time you can try to turn, like, a challenge into, like, something challenging into an opportunity. That's
Yeah.
so powerful. I'm thinking a lot about that now presently. So thank you for this one. And just a few seconds on yoga. My wife practices a lot of yoga, and I've come to think of it as, another way of mindfulness, where you position your body in a certain way that it's almost impossible to think of anything else, and then you become mindful. Is that how you think of it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think yoga is kind of a form of meditation in motion.
Right, exactly. So yeah, perfect. And are you familiar with what's his name now, forget it, Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle?
Yes, I'm familiar.
I read the Power Now, and it's I've shared this before, that when I first started looking at it, it sounded like, oh, this is a lot of woo woo, but then I read it, it's like, oh, no, this makes a lot of sense. This is really, really good. And now, one thing I want to just ask you is, when I read his book, it seems like for him, uh, the ideal is to be in like being in like being mode, like being mindful all the time, literally, and like you can jump out of it to get some stuff done or whatnot, but you should, like, the ideal is to be mindful literally all the time. Do you think that way too, or do you think it's in a different way?
I think, the more often you have experience of mindfulness in your life, the more options you have, and kind of the more flexibility you have. It's a tall order to be mindful all the time. It takes a lot of practice to get to that point. But whenever the thought occurs to me that, oh, I could try being mindful right now, I like to do it, and I never regret it. Especially when you get in the habit of being familiar with that state of being really in the present moment, and you can easily transition into it. It tends to improve your experience of life. It improves my experience of life.
100%.
Um,
I
and
think
so
that,
I don't want people to think that they're doing it wrong if they're not mindful all the time, because even a little bit of practice and familiarizing your brain and body a little bit with the state of consciousness in which you can choose your response, and you can choose to end reactivity that ends up exacerbating your own suffering, that's empowering too. But yeah, I mean, great if you really run with it and you're able to find yourself there more and more often. I think that's only going to be more empowering.
I think on a personal level, I think since I started reading, exploring, and learning more, there are a lot of times where, if we go back to 3-4 months ago, there's things that would have made me really upset, and then because I didn't understand really why, or I wasn't aware of it, I would be more upset and more upset and be really really mad at some place. But
Yeah.
now, where I've found this really really helpful and practical, it's like when I sense myself I'm starting to become upset, I just go immediately into like just observing that, like
Yeah.
being mindful of myself, thinking about stuff in direction, and then it doesn't happen. I don't become upset anymore like I used to. So that's where so far I've really felt the power of it.
Right. Sometimes the autopilot programs that we've conditioned ourselves to live by, yeah, we get irritated, we escalate without even really thinking about it, and we wind ourselves up, and we're we're just grinding our teeth in irritation. And if we can catch that in the early stages by just being aware, oh, this is that escalation process happening, with a lot of choice to step out of it and to choose a new way of understanding that experience. So our bodies don't get so agitated, so our minds don't get so agitated, and we can, just like you're saying, have a new experience. And then you learn, like, wow, maybe I don't need to be so activated by this kind of behavior from someone else. I don't have to let them control my emotions and my thoughts so much. I'm I'm in control as long as I'm aware.
Exactly. And I guess before we finish up here, are you, on your end, any resources that you like, books or other things?
Sure. I think a great book that really drives home this notion of meditation and mindfulness, not as a means to control your experience, but to open up to your experience, and why that might be a really beautiful and enriching thing to do, is this book that's called Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn. It's really a classic. It was written in the early 90s by this guy who pioneered the application of mindfulness and meditation to a lot of health conditions. He was a doctor in Boston, I think. Really beautifully written book that really drives home a lot of these key points about what's your intention when you're meditating and why is that intention worthwhile. So I recommend that book if anyone's curious. If you're feeling like you need a little bit of extra help, I haven't used it much myself, but I know that some people have found some of the apps that have a bit of a guided meditation, or a little bit of intro dialogue and then space for meditation, like Headspace, for example. Some people find that useful in terms of getting a practice off the ground, and they can transition to just doing it without the app eventually if they want. When I meditate, I use an app called Insight Timer, and it's an app that just has a timer that rings a calm little bell when you start meditating and then when the meditation finishes. And I just find that pleasant, as opposed to using the alarm I use to wake up in the morning, which is a little jarring. So it's just kind of a more peaceful way to time the experience. I recommend that.
Very, very cool. Well, yeah, I think that was super, super helpful, Trevor. I want to thank you for coming on, and stay in touch, and hopefully we'll see more of you here on the channel.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in learning more about this method, they can check out some of my blogs or my posts, liberatedSleep.com, or my Instagram at liberatedsleep.
I will post, of course, a link to that in the description. So yeah, thanks again, Trevor, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you, Daniel.